Okay, nice, perfect. Hello everybody. Time for our weekly Warframe reset. Let's go. Hopefully the mic isn't too loud. Got right up against me. Alright. Let's make it a bit louder. Just a tad bit louder. Yeah. Let's see if this
catching up lately. FSR and XeSS have made their way into more and more games, and FSR 4 is looking very promising, often better than Nvidia's latest DLSS 3. But there are still older titles like Rise of the Tomb Raider, and even slightly newer ones like Control, where DLSS is the only upscaling option. So if you don't have an Nvidia GPU, you either have to play at a lower resolution or get less FPS. As for ray tracing, I've never had a GPU that could run it well anyways, so I've always left it off. Same with frame generation. It's a cool feature, but it's not supported on the RTX 30 series or RX 6000 series, so it's not a technology I've been able to use. So yeah, switching to AMD came with quite a few sacrifices, but for how much raw performance you get with the 6900 XT, especially at the price they go for, it's easy for me to look past those trade-offs. With those trade-offs in mind, let's see how the 6900 XT handles today's most demanding Unreal Engine 5 titles, competitive games, and everything in between. The first game I tried when I set up this PC was Cyberpunk 2077, and out of the 11 games I'm going to be showing you today, this is absolutely one of the most difficult ones to run, especially with fully maxed path tracing. This game was so demanding on my 3060 laptop to the point where I had to enable DLSS if I wanted to play above 60 FPS on high settings, which is definitely kind of disappointing for something that I spent about $700 on. But on the 6900 XT, I was able to experience ultra settings without any form of upscaling. After playing this game on and off and finally completing every ending, including the DLC though, I definitely spent most of my time using FSR quality because I did enjoy having the extra smoothness. However, Cyberpunk is most famous for its impressive lighting features rather than its models and textures. And while using FSR performance, you can play with ultra ray tracing if you want it. Path tracing, however, requires FSR Ultra performance to maintain at least 50 FPS, which means path tracing isn't really viable on this card, not unless you're okay with serious visual artifacting. However, during my 2,000 hours of playtime on this PC, I am embarrassed to admit that 90% of that time was spent in this next game, Fortnite.
168
Despite it being a mostly CPU-bound game, most people believe that AMD GPUs are incapable of running this game smoothly in performance mode. The issue with that is that it forced a lot of AMD GPU users to use DX12 instead of performance mode. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but for a game where a large portion of its player base competes competitively, being forced onto DX12 causes quite a few issues. It increases your input delay pretty significantly, is more intensive on the GPU, and is simply unusable in competitive to the point where performance mode isn't just a preference. It's a requirement if you actually want to win. And these rumors about AMD graphics cards being bad for Fortnite have been circulating around for years, but are the rumors actually true? Well, after spending a couple minutes playing Fortnite, I can confidently say that I have no idea why people are having stuttering problems in this game. The 6900 XT was maintaining 240 FPS like it was nothing. And the only times it couldn't maintain 240 FPS were because of my CPU not being able to keep up when there are too many players and builds in a small area. Even after testing lower-end AMD GPUs like the RX 6600M and RX 580, the game ran extremely smoothly. To my surprise, the only time I ever had stutters was when I was using an Intel GPU, the ARC V580. So the stutter issues are still definitely real, but I guess I got lucky with AMD.
Was that
3
80
times
enemies?
in a row.
That's
The third
crazy.
game we're testing is Rise of the Tomb Raider, which just so happens to be the third game I tested when I first built the computer. Though this game is now approaching 10 years of age, it is still surviving the test of time and was actually the reason I made the jump from integrated graphics to the RTX 3060. However, the 3060 did suffer on maxed out textures, so I was eager to see how it would look on my new AMD graphics card. And yeah, the first time I booted this game up on this GPU, it was low-key life-changing. Getting over 200 FPS at 1440p with everything maxed out blew my expectations.
Excavate
The
might
sequel
be
to
a
this
problem.
game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, was one of the very first implementations of ray tracing. And though the 6900 XT isn't great at ray tracing relative to its raster performance, it still maintains over 100 FPS with maxed out settings and ray trace shadows, and an even more impressive 160 FPS by simply turning ray tracing off. Control was a game that I got into relatively late, and the only reason I ever tried it in the first place was because my friend gave me his Epic Games account, which just so happens to have this game on it. But this game is a great example of why it was a good choice to choose the 6900 XT over its nvidia competition. At ultra settings, you can see that the VRAM usage is well over 13 gigabytes. So before you can even turn on ray tracing with the RTX 4070 Super, it's already at its VRAM limit. And though the 6900 XT can do ray tracing on the high preset at 1080p, Ultra RT at 1440p native leaves a lot to be desired. But things start looking better in this next game. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, our first PlayStation port of the video, is another VRAM hungry game that runs amazingly well on this GPU. Although it does offer full ray tracing, it isn't an option on AMD graphics cards. Either way, at fully maxed out settings, the 6900 XT was able to finish the intro cutscene with 112 average FPS and a 1% low of 82 FPS, which is plenty for a game in this genre. Fragpunk, one of the newest Unreal Engine 5 titles, but also one of the most well optimized, can easily do 500 FPS with this GPU at low settings. And if you have a 240Hz monitor like I do, the 1% lows of 252 means this game will feel consistent through and through on these settings. But with a monster GPU like this, you might as well up the settings to the highest preset, and it's good to know that I can still get over 200 FPS without upscaling, frame generation, or compromising on any graphic settings. Black Myth Wukong, in contrast, is one of the most demanding games in history. Good luck playing this Souls-like game at 1440p native with very high settings. You're only going to get 40 FPS with this card. Fortunately, FSR quality does a really good job here and brings us up to 78 average FPS without sacrificing much visual quality. Ghost of Tsushima, despite originally releasing as a PlayStation exclusive in 2020, the PC port released just last year, and strangely isn't as VRAM hungry as something like Ratchet & Clank. In the opening scene, it does a solid 90 average frames with a 1% low not far behind at 75 FPS. The Uncharted 4 PC port released in 2022 doesn't offer too much in terms of graphical advancements, but still looks great by today's standards while not being too demanding. The XT easily holds an average frame rate of 137 and a 1% low of 99 FPS. To close out the benchmarks, we're going to end off with Rocket League, simply because I've picked this game back up again recently. Let me show you how it's done. High quality render settings with everything else set to performance keeps this game at 1100 average FPS and 800 in the 1% lows. This PC is completely overkill for a game like this. While gaming was a breeze at my preferred settings, that wasn't the only thing I used the 6900 XT for. Being a content creator, you can probably guess that I've spent a decent chunk of my time editing videos, rendering timelines, and doing just about everything in between. But the thing is, AMD gets absolutely slammed when it comes to productivity. Whether it's video editing, encoding, 3D rendering, or anything related to machine learning or AI tools, NVIDIA GPUs that would normally be in the same conversation as the 6900 XT are now miles ahead. In Premiere Pro and After Effects, for example, it wasn't unusable, of course, but it wasn't noticeably faster than my RTX 3060 laptop, which sounds crazy considering the 3060 Mobile is an entry-level graphics card. But to be fair, the 6900 XT was still more than capable of handling everything I threw at it. OBS was totally fine since I wasn't streaming most of the time, just recording gameplay. And even when I did stream the few times that I didn't run into issues you wouldn't normally expect. So even though Nvidia undoubtedly has the upper hand in productivity and AI workloads, I don't care.
We do not care.
The 6900 XT is perfect as my daily driver. I never felt like it was slowing me down or holding me back. And that's more than I can say for a lot of GPUs I've used before. This GT 710. I cannot believe this thing cost $30 whole. For that price, I could have watched the Minecraft movie twice. But how long do I think the 6900 XT will last? Because sure, right now it delivers impeccable 1440p performance across a wide range of games. But games are only going to get harder and harder to run. In spite of that, I honestly see it running strong for at least a couple more years, especially with the continued development of AI upscaling and frame generation. I don't expect to upgrade anytime soon because the card still performs at a level that suits my needs perfectly. Even as games get more demanding, its 16 gigabytes of VRAM should help it stay relevant, and I'm confident that it will continue to be a great choice for 1440p gaming. And if I could go back in time and pick a different card, I probably wouldn't. This GPU gave me the best balance between price and performance for what I needed. and overall, I don't think I could be more satisfied with my switch to AMD. That said, there were many compromises I had to make. Earlier, I said that this video card misses out on NVIDIA features like frame generation. But what if you could have AMD's price to performance and NVIDIA's advanced features at the same time? Well, I might have found the solution. If you want to see me use both AMD and NVIDIA in the same PC to hit 240 FPS in every game, watch this video next.
How's the app? Okay.
Bones of my father, fathom drowned. Behold me. Carcass of my mother, flame devoured. Behold me. Limbs of my children, piecemeal, unblinking. Behold me.
Excavator deployed. Protect the unit while it extracts the artifact.
You are in for it now.
Look for power carrier foes. Strike them down and bring their cells back to the excavators. This excavator is fully powered. Additional fuel cells will be used to restore its shields. The scanner has picked up a target. Go to the dig site. This excavator is fully powered. Additional fuel cells will be used to restore its shields. Elsewhere for his cryotic supplies. Good work.
Alright, so any of y'all who follow this channel for any length of time know that I am like exceedingly paranoid, especially of my personal information getting leaked out into, you know, the ether somewhere. I mean, I am a radically black YouTube after all. I'm on like 5 or 6 government watch lists at this point that I know of. And so when I started getting phone calls and text messages from area codes that I didn't even exist, it kind of gets my mind to percolate about who and what else is a hold of my personal information. And that's not scary at all. Luckily, that's where today's sponsor, Aura, comes in. Aura alerts you when your data has been leaked onto the dark web. It also puts in requests to those data brokerage websites to have your information removed from off of their list. So now you ain't got to worry about at least so many phone calls and text messages from area codes that don't even exist. But that's not all, folks. You also get access to things like a password manager, a VPN, and fast fraud alerts that let you know when somebody is trying to access any of your accounts. So go ahead and use my link on the screen right now or in the description, or if you, for whatever reason, can't go to any of those things, just go to aura.com/lilbill for 14 days free.
All right.
Again, that's aura.com/lilbill and protect your neck today, or pay for it. Yeah, literally pay for it, like with your credit, dog. Yeah.
Alright, so depending on when this video drops, it's been anywhere between like 3 and several months since Kendrick Lamar not only put on the greatest Super Bowl halftime performance of all time, but single-handedly ended systemic racism by educating the entire world on Special Field Order number 15, a proclamation that literally no one except the graduates of your local HBCU knew about until KDOT made passing reference to it, because the rest of us, I guess, are just a bunch of illiterate morons who aren't tapped in enough to the culture to endorse sexual assault ritual just to get a Greek letter branded on them.
The fuck?
In order that
I was gone for like a minute.
examples of white Americans' really bad habit of Indian giving stuff that ironically don't really belong to them to give in the first place, stuff that they even more ironically stole from the actual Indians in the first place, who aren't even Indians in the first place. And yeah, I do know that I'm starting to throw the Andrew Schultz line, but don't worry, I have a lot more material than just rereading Stone Toss comics aloud, because unlike that nigga, I'm actually funny. Yeah, come see about me. Here's the thing,
Well,
none of that actually happened. I mean, the halftime show part did happen, and it was a decent enough. It was a pretty good performance. I'm not gonna lie, relative to what I folks like to say. But that's just it. I never really expected him to stand on stage and tear a photo of Trump on Epstein Island in twain, because I mean, Sinead O'Connor did that like 30 years ago, didn't she? And y'all see what happened to her career afterward, right? Also, Sinead is like top 3 white women of all time, and Jane number 3 or 3. The others are Jane Fonda and Dolly Parton in any order. But I also hear an argument for Adele or that chick from the Cranberries. What can I say? I have a thing for Anglophile. Also, Bryce Dallas Howard or Christina Hendricks for what should be obvious reasons. Anyway, milk maidens aside, the point I'm getting at is it didn't hit for me the way that it did for some other folks, specifically a demographic of the generation that I'll call the new blacks.
Alright, perfect.
Alright, so those of y'all who've been following me for a minute.
Hurry the fuck up.
Around
Hurry the fuck up.
When I begin to start panhandling for money like the junkies posted up at the off-ramp of your local freeway.
The
But
fuck?
I'm doing it for a good cause, and no, Fent is not one. I know summer ain't get here yet, but before you know it, back to school season is going to be here, and a lot more people than what you know really can't afford to buy a new book bag every year for their kid, especially if they got multiple kids. And so for, I don't know how many years now, definitely for much longer than I've been to YouTube, me and a handful of folks from my local church have been trying to alleviate some of that burden. Oh yeah, look at that. Single biggest facilitator of all this, bigoted according to left tutors, actually doing the thing that most left tutors get paid to yap about that don't actually do themselves. If it's true, it's still the thing to say. I don't know. This is why
There we go.
don't know nobody else. Anyway, y'all should already know the drill by now. I'm going to leave the GoFundMe link to this year's book bag drive both on this video on the screen somewhere and leave it in the description. So if you do have it, and that's if you have it, dog, you can help us be a help to somebody this year. Again, if you don't have it,
Tough
please,
Forge.
man, don't
Fuck.
go broke trying to help strangers that you probably never going to see in real life. Like I said, I ain't that type of left dude. I ain't really a left dude at all. Or at least I'm trying to get out of that silo, dog. Why you think I keep antagonizing y'all? Leave me alone, man.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
See, my problem was never with the politics of Kendrick's performance, because I've been listening to Kendrick for like over 10 years now, and pretty much everything he writes is political in some degree. It's just that basically everything he said didn't resonate with me the way that it did a lot of other folk, because in my best Sunshine Anderson voice, I've heard it all before. Again, I just did a video a few months ago where I talked about how my father had a portrait of famous black faces that featured among them Elijah Muhammad and Marcus freaking Garvey. I told y'all a while ago that my first real crush was on a little white girl named Stephanie, and I was rewarded for that with a trip to the Great Blacks and Wax Museum and a lifetime fear of noose knots as a result. I literally have a god brother whose legal name is Supreme. So my point is, this don't move me like it do some of y'all that are just now being exposed to it. And like I've said before, that's okay, dog. Before you click off and pout about how the bald dude on the camera hurt your feelings for not being woke enough, know that it's okay if you didn't know where 40 Acres and a Mule came from before Kendrick, even though, I mean, you know, that's been the name of Spike's production company for longer than Kendrick's been alive, but that, again, that's aside from the point. It's okay if this performance was the spark for your own personal journey into black identity politics. It's perfectly okay if the John hits for you, but for me personally, it just don't. And I don't think that anybody should have.
I have so many fucking unveiled ribbons, bro.
This is the internet where nuance does hang from a noose knot. You know, somebody did have an issue.
Kit gun?
A lot of somebody's. But it got me to thinking about something that's been percolating in the back of my mind for a minute now. See, if you ask me, the backlash that not only I, but a bunch of other folk with similar sensibilities have gotten for not crowning Kendrick the new emperor of emancipation isn't just a bunch of K-bots running from channel to channel complaining that no one is willing to lick Kenny's cum off their face. I think it's something deeper than that, frankly. And I think it's indicative of the intersection of issues that have given rise to what I'll call the new black problem.
The struggle with the new black, a new black is even coming up with an idea of community in an age where it's essentialized, right? Yeah. In an age where you go on the internet and all you see are like, you see Kai Cenat skits, like he come up like iCarly, you just see him every 5 seconds and you're like, oh, well, it's a little laugh or whatever, but it's not really uplifting.
Oh, right? Shit.
Like uplifting figures for me was like I know this is controversial, but like Kobe Bryant. Me and my dad would sit down on the couch and watch Kobe Bryant. We watched Kobe Bryant drop 81 against the Toronto Raptors in Canada. And that's when I decided to be a basketball player. That's when I decided, yeah, niggas are cool. Like, you know what I mean? There's shit like that. There's shit like that in Canada that just, you don't get the same experience community or the same experience
Redeemer.
Of satiability within community. All you get is the degrading experience from an outside experience of whiteness, right? And then you're thrust into this double consciousness and then told how to react. I'm not gonna lie, you said there was also problems with new blacks. I see that too, because that's also where me and my sister kind of divided, right? She kind of went the corporate route.
Fuck that shit. Ooh, like, I'm on a fucking roll today.
I gotta get my degree.
All right.
All my requirements. I gotta get myself together just so I can help my folks and everything, right? And I see that it's a very real point of view, because at the end of the day, no one gonna help her survive. She's a black woman in this world. She was thrust into that same environment, but she was older than me. She had to sign more papers than me. Like not my parents didn't know like any English really, so it was just me and my sister going back and forth with them, like relaying the experience, translating, doing all that stuff. Like I think me and my sister, that radicalized me and my sister before like our parents even, right? In essence, to like how much we have to work in this world, to how much we have to really rely on ourselves, even though our parents were amazing sources of love and stability and all that in this world. At the end of the day, they couldn't teach us the black experience, and I feel like they
let's check this out.
That's horrible, right?
Now, be forewarned, some of y'all might hear some things that I'm about to say, and it'll rub you raw than running a rubber band up and down your bare dingling at full brick.
Oh shit.
But this is also not going to be the diatribe against the new blacks that a lot of the rest of y'all are expecting and some of y'all want, low-key. I don't think that any of that is productive, and frankly, the way that a lot of folk talk about those other folk is kind of the core issue, to be honest. Rather, my point with this video is to understand why and where this divide came from, and perhaps at least begin to answer how we can bridge it. But that also means all of y'all are going to have to fall back, because I swear to God, if I hear one more light-skinned suburbanite tell me about how not tapped in I am, I'm going to beat them. Okay, so first we gotta at least try to understand what new black even means. If you ask me, new black is any black person who is just learning to engage their own blackness despite having had limited exposure to conventional blackness to this point. This could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe you just didn't grow up in community with other black folk, or if you did, you grew up without the trappings of, you know, a conventional black experience. Think stuff like the Crisco can with the chicken or fish grease sitting on top of the kitchen counter, or the stove light on at nighttime signaling that the kitchen was now closed, and a behind whooping awaited anybody who thought otherwise. Sleeping head to head in the same bed as your cousins and waking up early on a Sunday morning to beat them all downstairs to get one game of Mortal Kombat in before shepherded into your mom's hat back to Sunday school. Before sitting in a 2-hour service, not counting the extra hour tagged on for praise breaks and altar calls. If you've never seen at least 3 of these,
I guess we will need reach.
The 5 Heartbeats, the Jacksons, Dreamgirls, or the MC Hammer movie in one sitting, yeah, you're probably new black, is what I'm saying. At least if you're American. We'll come to that part later. But it's not just not having the experience, though. Maybe you're like me and you did grow up with all of that, but you were force-fed blackness until you grew up and wound up rebelling to it to the point of becoming anti-black at some point, until enough exposure to milkmaids and chalk jockeys made you rethink that whole integration thing, and you wound up boomeranging back to the point of ultra-black to make up all of those years of lost melanin. So yeah, according to my own definition, Bill was new black at one point. And that's why I do have empathy for a lot of y'all. Again, a lot of y'all, not all.
I lived it already. Funny enough, I think the biggest perpetrator of this is Kendrick Lamar. But that's another thing. But inside Euphoria, he said, there's no accents you can sell me. And that's how I feel. You can't repackage culture I live to me. So all this deep symbolism of, well, this represents this and this means this is what I lived it. I lived it. My grandmother was a crackhead. My mom was an high school dropout. These aren't stories, like the stories from the hood aren't new to me. I come from it. So when I see these images on the screens and I hear them in music, it feels.
Are you
redundant.
serious?
And I feel like you said, the people who enjoy these themes are overcompensating for the lack of living it, right? Because your experience wasn't that. You need to feel the pain of the trauma porn. You need to feel the pain of hearing these awful things told to you again, seeing these awful scenes replayed on the screen, because that wasn't your reality. Like I say it all the time. Like I didn't learn this stuff from textbooks. I didn't go to school for sociology. This was me talking to niggas in my neighborhood. This is me learning. This is real life learning experience. And I think to be honest, to expand the point a little bit, I don't know how much you're gonna use it is, but I do think that's what pisses me off about it, is the niggas who have the textbook knowledge try to downplay my real life knowledge, as if like mine is inferior, as if because I didn't go to school and because I don't have the proper language to explain it the same way you do, that my opinion is less valid now. No, this is first-hand accounts. Point of view. This is first-person perspective versus third-person perspective. Like I lived it. This is Call of Duty to me, nigga. Like this, like it's
Dog.
different. So I think that shit pisses me off
Wait.
most about it. I don't know why I'm talking the word petit bourgeois, and I feel like that's not a slur. I need a slur for these niggas. I've been trying to conjure up a slur, like cause these.
I call them cul-de-sackers.
I like that. But here's what the part about it is though, because right, you from Philly too. You from Philly adjacent. I'm from Philly. Yeah. So the story of my life is when I was in 8th grade, I was like start running around trying to be a tough guy. I lived on 22nd and Diamond, and my mom saw that. And my mom, I basically lived the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air story, where my mom was like, "You moving with your daddy up inside Uptown." Now Uptown,
accommodations,
it's a little nicer.
Alright.
It's lawns, it's finished.
That's
basements.
good. That's good.
And my mom was like, "You gotta live up there," because I was getting to it, and that didn't do nothing but delay the inevitable for me. But while I was up there, I did like start to learn some of like the suburban culture. Like I got into like the Childish Gambinos of the world, and I got into like I tried to skateboard a little bit, but that didn't stop me from like not understanding who I was. I feel like it's this late in life realization that you will always be a nigga that bothers me. Like this is you 22 years old dating your white counterpart, realizing that you two will never be equals inside the eyes of most people. No matter how hard you try, they will always look at you inferior. No matter how hard you try, your white boyfriend will always say, let me touch your hair. No matter how hard you try, your white girlfriend will always fetishize your big back body. There's no escaping that. So because they realize this later on in life, it's this extra onslaught of like, no, we need more of this. I'm like, no, we don't.
I get what it's like to feel like you've missed out on a whole part of your identity to the point that now you have to play catch up.
This is good. This is good as hell.
Welcome back into the house. I get what it's like to feel like you've robbed yourself of.
This is good as hell.
Let a
The fuck?
handful of dickheads bully you out of your own blackness because you didn't wear the right clothes or didn't listen to the right music. I am a black punk after all. But therein kind of lies the first part of this that I wanted to dive into. I made reference to it in the Black Wrestler and Black Punk videos, but part of
I guess we don't need.
the new blacks is a lot of the old heads are a-holes. Let's just keep it a buck. Again, most if not all of this video is anecdotal, but it's been my experience that the reason I overcompensated in my early 20s, I guess, is because of constantly being told in one way, shape, or form that I wasn't black enough, because I didn't go to public school, because I didn't listen to Gangsta Grillz mixtapes, because I played electric guitar and wore stuff like Doc Martens and plaid button downs, and still do. Despite the fact that, again, I was literally raised by Garveyites and recovering 5%ers, I wasn't black enough because I didn't wear bathing ape hoodies and see-through Air Forces from the wholesaler on Mulberry Street up in New York. And now it's because when I was 12 and 13, I was actually riding up to New York to buy all of that garbage and hock it off the U-jack-offs. That's why. So yeah, who's black enough now?
At 15 years old was the first time I learned about slavery, and it's because Edmonton's curriculum purposefully just strips black culture of its connotation. Even though they've added like new initiatives like Black History Month and stuff, but it doesn't really satiate the need for I guess history or a community to be given to black people. Because at the end of the day, when we're kind of in these experiences of whiteness, we become choked by it, and it becomes us in very subconscious ways. You know that experience of double consciousness?
Yeah.
I can't remember my first experience, I guess, like feeling it, because at the end of the day, my skin is dark as hell, so like I'm always gonna be perceived as black. But you know, I remember thinking there was all these interactions are just super weird, because when I was in a bus, you know, walking in the bus, my first day of grade 5 at this like all white school south side, I was like, I made it. Like, we moved south side. This is an amazing school. I made it, right? I'm going to school. I got my backpack on. I'm like, I go walk to my seat, and it says like Thea on the top there. And then beside it, like Colton, like this white person's name.
Yeah.
I try to sit down. This person's not letting me sit. I'm like, why can't I sit? And they're all pointing and laughing. I'm like, why can't I sit? And I'm just standing there confused. I'm like, why can't I sit? Just like giggling with them, like almost, right? Yeah. And it's always been like that in essence to like racism, where it's like, they will understand your degradation 9,000% better than you understand yours, because at the end of the day, the eyes doing the degrading are not
access is denied,
right?
huh?
So to me, it's always been a sense of like teetering to like, what's true? What can I connect with? Like, who's really for me? And that experience is very, it's patronizing to say, because it's just something you won't get unless you're black, right? It's like, who's gonna point me in this direction? Who's gonna show me the history that I want to see? Who's gonna tell me that I belong in this world? And in essence, those were basketball coaches, sadly, right? People who, I guess, latch onto black boys. My guidance counselors, my English teacher. Thank God, because without my English teacher, I wouldn't be doing YouTube. But like things
this
like
is the
that,
same shit.
Like that, I really latched onto, and they weren't always black. So in essence, I had to you know, rework a lot within myself too.
The more I
Blast.
think about it, most of the stuff I was doing in middle school, I really should have just been a street nigga low-key. So I guess all those choir rehearsals
Negative
like,
multi-shot.
did do something for me after all.
Are you
I mean,
fuck
aside from
crazy?
shaming me into delayed orgasms that totally had no effect on my love life until marriage. Different video. Anyway, this is the kind of problem with the way we understand blackness, right? I talked a while ago, in which video I don't remember and don't really care to go find out, about something in political science that is called a Thermidorian reaction. It's a reference to the French Revolution, how after the revolution, the most radical elements of it stepped into the power vacuum and overcorrected to the point of creating their own, some would even argue, worse reign of terror than the monarchy had initiated. Until there was a revolt against the revolution that overcorrected the overcorrection to the point of creating Napoleon. So yeah, there you have it. That's what I think a lot of this is. People who for one reason or another, in one way or another, were told that they weren't black enough. And now they've overcorrected to the point of, in my opinion, gassing some things more than they really need to be just to reaffirm their own blackness.
This is fine. This is fine. This is totally fine.
You're the one who's out of touch or not tapped into the culture, whatever the culture is supposed to be. And some of y'all are probably in the comments now saying some sort of, well, that's generation crash out for you. Yeah, I do think that the general divide thing is a factor, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. But let's not get this twisted. It ain't just Zoomers and Alphas doing this, y'all. By the time this video does drop, they'll be close to like a year, now that I think about it, that I did record a video that I'm still going back and forth over whether
Dante made it.
or not,
Okay.
about the whole
Yeah, you're
biracial
crazy.
and black thing and how internet brain rot that is, and I still think it is. But toward the end of that video, I made
Oh,
the
you're
point
crazy.
that the reason it is
You're
so
crazy,
stupid
Dante.
to me is because when I was growing up, it
Foamy
wasn't
count.
even worth the discourse. It didn't matter what you looked like, or even what your parents looked like, or even where your parents came
Dante.
from. If you had at least
The
one
Perigal?
As a matter of fact, if you had a grandparent, some relative that could reasonably call themselves black, and you moved like a black person,
The
then
jack.
you were black, or at least
Okay,
as black
no,
as you
you're
allowed
crazy.
yourself to be. That's just what it was. That for black grandparents BS was something I had never even heard of until social media, particularly when Twitter became the app of choice for YouTube University alumni. What I'm saying is a lot of folk found their tribe online and then decided to amplify each other's voices
Okay,
while
assassinate
sequestering
is gonna be
themselves in
tough
the echo chamber of
as
shared
hell.
experience, to the point that once they finally did venture into the outer wilds, they were convinced that their voice was the only one that mattered, which really just sounds like the internet in a nutshell, does it not? But perhaps more alarming is that unwittingly, what those folks did was use the master's tools for their own ends, pointing the finger at the other to validate their own blackness, which in some people's cases was othered by somebody else as not being black enough. Y'all see the whole Thermidorian connection yet? If y'all have ever read the Mass comic books, this is basically what I call the Stanley Ipkiss effect, where the loser finally gets his lick back and in the process proves that he was just as big a butt wipe as his own bullies, if not more so. What I'm saying is the four black grandparents people are no better than the you talk white people, who themselves are no better than the this is the problem with black America people. But again, whose fault is that? Y'all taught them to be this way, low-key. Y'all taught them that a very specific presentation of blackness is the only authentic one, and that they needed to present that blackness in order to validate themselves. So now they just found another way to do so. Y'all were the ones who made blackness not only a monolith, but exclusionary at that. So a lot of these folk online telling people like me that we're not tapped in enough for Kendrick Set to hit us hard enough to tweet about how much it changed the world, all they did was find Big Bro's blick, and they used it against them. Sounds like a Jay-Z documentary. Oh wait, Trap Lord Ross already did it. Like I said about hoteps and petite bourgeois blacks, new blacks, or at least the permutation of new blacks we have now, are in a lot of ways the old heads' fault for not passing the sticks to that one cousin who came over with a Pantera t-shirt and a great copy of Dude, Where's My Car? that movie actually slaps though. Not gonna lie. I think that there's probably no better example of new blackness than who's, in my opinion, the patron saint of it, Colin Kaepernick. Now, before we go any further in the movie, understand that I'm not saying that because of Colin's biraciality. I literally just dispelled that a couple minutes ago. That said, there is an insignificant number of biracial kids, specifically those biracial kids who grew up out of community, especially out of community in the suburbs, who do fall into the new black category. But again, it is not because of their dissension, it's because of their socialization. So let's please stay out of my comments with that race science BS. We're moving on. Like, if all I said up top doesn't for some reason make sense for you, Colin's journey from stock photo ambiguous boy to Malcolm lowercase x is basically new blackness in a nutshell, if you ask me. I think it's important to understand that despite the way it was presented by the media, Colin didn't suddenly have a political epiphany after getting benched. And despite the way some outlets covered it, it wasn't to draw attention to himself after losing his job. But I mean, that's journalism for you these days, right? A couple of Google searches, wiki entries, and maybe a subreddit or two before extrapolating the topic based on your own implicit bias. Yeah, Trap Will Ross has entered the chat, and yeah, he can come see me if he has a problem. Colin's journey into full Give Us Free started at least during his undergrad days, and arguably went back further than that. I'm not going to get too deep into Colin's backstory because one, Flimlo Raps already did that a few years ago, and two, Colin's made a bag off of telling it himself ad nauseum, so y'all can go look it up on your own time. But Colin, being the biracial adopted child of the whitest couple you know, was negotiating his blackness at least as early as his junior high years. At least according to his own self-created biopic, which you can find on Netflix, by the way. And this series, I think, encapsulates the complexity of not just Colin as a person, but a lot of the points I want to touch on if I haven't already. I won't go into too much detail with the actual content of the series, but Colin in his early life was faced with a variety of what we'd call microaggressions from not just outsiders, but classmates and his own parents, particularly when it came to his presentation. After kowtowing to the powers that be more times than he felt comfortable, Colin did eventually choose blackness and chose it unapologetically well before he ever got to the league and arguably before he got to college. But that's just it. Like, watching this series back, two things become apparent to me. Colin wants you to understand not only just how black he actually is, but how much he identifies with his blackness to the point of basically pistol whipping you with his identity at every opportunity. But perhaps as importantly, he wants you to know just how much he struggled to get to this point. He wants you to know that he struggled just as much as you have, even if not in the same ways. And I mean, it kind of feels like he's overcompensating for something, you know?
Obama is a mulatto. That's the one drop rule.
I mean, listen, we can sit here and go back and forth about just how much a white passing biracial man does actually struggle compared to someone like me if he didn't choose said struggle as his identity. But again, this isn't that video. That's coming in a few months. This series feels like the new black version of the tragic mulatto trope is what I'm saying. It isn't so much that he's stuck between two worlds, it's that the world he wants won't accept him until he proves he belongs, which, I mean, that was kind of Mary's whole subplot in Sinners, wasn't it? Which, I mean, bet, he's not wrong, but there does come a point, in my opinion, where it feels like, you know, you're doing too much, dog. You know what I mean? Like we get it. You're so black that you brought a Hennessy pound cake to the church bake sale. You're so black that your daughter's dance studio used mamushi for her dance recital. You're so black that your son wears a grill as a mouth guard during football practice. Like, nigga, we get it already. You're the blackest thing in Hollywood since Wesley Snipes. But dog, you're insisting upon yourself now.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
It's like those people who would wear those "Not My Ancestors" shirts unironically back before they realized how cringe it was. Or the mayor of Baltimore wearing a DEI hire hoodie and walking out the "Not Like Us" on election night. Find that clip, Clarence, so they see what I'm talking about.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
Like, call me a hater or whatever, but that clip right there is what we really getting down to. And it's also what a lot of y'all look like to me on Super Bowl Sunday. And I'm gonna be real, I was just gonna let y'all have it until you decided to anoint yourselves the arbiters of black identity and then try to just don't get it. Anybody who didn't treat that John like the new mountaintop sermon.
I think it's important to make sure that we not talking about just corny niggas, because being a corny nigga that just like just a weirdo is different than being a nigga that's trying to catch up. And I feel like oftentimes when we have these conversations about these new blacks, people get misconstrued as if like we are trying to other part of the community. When like, no, we're not trying to other you niggas. We trying to, first of all, we want to tell some of y'all niggas, some of these niggas already here, they just don't know it yet. Otherly, the niggas who want to be here, we, like you said, we gotta tell you, slow your roll. We're here. We don't, there is standards and practices that you gotta learn first. There's standards and I know you're late to this party, but get in line. And I think that there's a certain hubris. There's a certain amount of just cockiness that comes from that side, where there is no slowdown. It's I know everything. Your story sounds like one of being like, oh shit, I don't know everything. All right, cool. Let me shut the fuck up. But I feel like to do that takes a level of intelligence. Like you know the old saying like, shut up when smart niggas talking to you. I shut up. I can tell when smarter niggas talking to me. I shut up and I listen because I want to soak up games so I can go repeat these things. I'm good at comprehending ideas and giving them back to people who are dumber than me. So that's what I need to do. That's like kind of my place in this life. But I feel like a lot of these niggas don't recognize that there are people smarter than you who are going to tell you these ideas. And it's not your job to talk back. It's not your job to do anything but understand what's being told to you and then go teach that to somebody else. Yeah, I mean that's your only goal. I feel like we on this side, we've been patient, but they have become the majority of pro-black voices on the internet. So it looks like that's what all of it looks like. I made that video a few weeks back ago when I was kicking like the whole leftist black to black back end, because I do feel like a lot of this shit is niggas sitting around circle jerking each other and not talking and not telling ideas to different people. One of my biggest pet peeves about politics, period, especially black politics, is that most black people are so politically unaware for 3 years and fucking 6 months, and then for the last 6 months leading up to an election, that's when black folk are invested. But not just the like black folk who aren't already invested inside politics, but the black folk who follow this shit and understand what's going on. That's when they come back and be like, yo, black folk, y'all gotta come out and vote. Y'all gotta don't reach out now. Don't reach out now. Because you ain't been doing the work. You haven't built the trust with these people. You haven't gone to talk to them. You haven't taken the ideas, the bigger ideas, and made them smaller. Because a lot of these ideas are hard to extrapolate and make it to like bite-sized pieces. It's not hard, but there is no work being done. And I feel like that is more important when like we talking about like why it's important for these niggas to get out. Because I think that a lot of it is not knowing how to talk to those kind of people. Not knowing how to like I said it like this. I got two younger brothers. One is 21 and one is 25. Both of them got kids. I'm 27. I'm no kids. Both of them got kids. One of them works in construction. The other one works in fast food. These niggas got real jobs and real responsibilities. They have no time to follow politics. They have no time. There's no time, like they have real life issues right here in front of them. I give a fuck about what the office got going on. How am I going to pay my electric bill this month? So it's our duties, our responsibility as more politically inclined Negroes to come back and teach these folk. And I think that's the idea we try to get at here is like, well, how can you be so pro-black, but your pro-blackness doesn't extend to these kind of niggas over here? Shut the fuck up and listen. And now instead of fucking listen, when you listen, bring it back.
But back to Mayor, my president is black for a second. I found this specifically to be cringe, not because it wasn't authentic, like I genuinely believe that bro is really that corny, but because in my opinion, it turns blackness from an identity into an aesthetic. And in that vein, a not insignificant number of folk then turn that aesthetic into their whole identity. But again, we gotta point back to the niggas who did that with an even more specific aesthetic to really get down to brass tacks. The people who clowned their classmates for doing theater and listening to Linkin Park or whatever. So let me get back to Colin for a minute. I don't know, man. I'm not saying that he's inauthentic. Quite the opposite, really. But I do think that even when the whole protest thing was ongoing, Colin was always a little too preoccupied with optics, to the point that when he did wind up getting run out of the league for those optics, instead of dedicating the bulk of his newfound free time to actual direct action, he spent the bulk of it building his brand, which I don't know, maybe he thought that was the most effective way to foster the direct action that he did wind up initiating, because I'm not sitting here and saying that he didn't, because he most definitely did. But again, if that be the case, isn't that the problem right there, man? Like, there's a reason Malcolm said what he said about celebrities being relied upon to lead the revolution or whatever, which again, considering the impetus for this video is so appropriate, it's scary. It's kind of like I've been doing this whole black and proud thing for a hot minute now. I guess the point I'm getting at is Colin's story is way more nuanced and complex than the extremes of both sides painted it out to be. Like, let's not forget, supposedly his biggest thing was always getting his job back after being blackballed for, you know, his freedom fighting.
You had those dreams when you were a kid.
Even though that job became less and less a priority as he became so much of a celebrity that Riding the Pine for a Poverty franchise was far less appealing than being BLM's unofficial brand ambassador. Y'all know what I mean? If you ask me, Colin is neither Sean King nor Huey Newton, but somehow he's painted as either one or the other of those extremes depending on where you stand. And I think to a lot of people that propped him up as the latter, it was to overcorrect for the people who insisted upon the former. But in the process of the endless discourse over the protest itself and even the protester, most folk kind of just forgot what he was supposed to be protesting to begin with, or at least the actual protest itself became so talked about to the point of distracting from its purpose. I'm not even saying that it was necessarily his fault that the protest got more attention than actual police brutality. But what I am saying is that that protest wasn't nearly as impactful as some folk made it out to be, yet we glazed him ceaselessly for it to the point that we basically made him Black Jesus for the second half of my 20s. But that's the thing, we've done this before, man, and that's what folk like me keep coming back to. We did it with Kareem, we did it with Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. We did it with Ali, who literally lost his title in 3 years of his prime for fighting the power. Colin Kaepernick was by no means the first pro athlete to use his platform to draw attention to black issues. He wasn't even the only one to do it during his time. 2 years earlier, a bunch of NBA superstars like LeBron and Kobe, and yes, even Kyrie, wore those I Can't Breathe shirts, remember? During warm-ups to bring attention to the death of Eric Garner that same year. The same year as Colin's protest, Rams players walked out during introductions with their hands raised, mirroring the position that Michael Brown took before he was shot and killed by police that same year. Going back to LeBron, he established the Promise Academy in partnership with JP Morgan and Chase in the University of Akron, so that kids who graduated from that school will receive a full ride to that university. But none of those actions were nearly as provocative as Colin taking a knee during the national anthem, and that's why we remember him and what he did so much, and why it was such a hot topic of conversation for so long. And that's the problem, man. Listen, I'm not trying to take away from the symbolism of Colin's protest or even the symbolism of Colin himself, but at EOD, what did any of that accomplish besides pissing off a bunch of boat truckers and spurring on some Google searches on police brutality that ultimately led to no real direct action to address it? What did I Can't Breathe ultimately accomplish? What did Choose Love and End Racism ultimately do for the NFL besides rub that peach-faced piss-willer we call a president raw enough to complain about it to Roger? Again, y'all can call me a hater or whatever, but I've seen this story way too many times that it hurts. And honestly, it kind of pisses me off that 5 years after the whole world marched for days, tore down Confederate statues, and renamed their streets BLM Boulevard, that we all are still falling for the same doggone okie doke, man. That's my thing. Nothing substantive, at least as far as I can find, came directly from the anthem protest. Nothing but a bunch of discourse and outrage that basically died out by the next season when Cat was out of the league. But that's not the part we remember, because it's the part we don't want to remember. We remember Colin sacrificing his career on the cross of coloredness, and of that being the example of how protests ought to look, even if said protests ultimately mean nothing beyond their symbolism. I'm gonna be real, a lot of us are so stuck on being on the so-called right side of history that we don't really care about how much that history actually amounts to being anything tangible, so long as we can say that we were a part of the history. You know what I'm saying? Being seen by the right people, having the right opinion is what too many folk are satisfied with. I think that activism for a lot of people, I'm not gonna lie, stops at just that. You know what I mean? And to make it even worse, they do little if anything with that opinion besides share it with other folk.
Folks are afraid to be revolutionaries. Folks are afraid to put the work in. I tell niggas all the time, like, I'm not moved by any multi-millionaire artist telling me that the revolution won't be televised. I'm not moved by that, because you're on television saying it. I'm not moved by this, nigga. If you really want to do something, we gotta go outside. Listen, at my core, I'm an anarchist. At my core, I know that the only way to fix this shit is to burn this shit down. But I know that, like I learned, to reference pop culture, like I learned during the 100 men versus one gorilla, niggas are afraid to be martyrs. Niggas, a lot of that talking point was niggas being like, well, as soon as the gorilla killed one of y'all, we all running. I was like, no, you gotta know that some of us gonna die. Some of us gonna die. But if some of us die, but the result is better for everybody, is that not a worthy death? But I think the easier option is I'm gonna put on the face, I'm gonna put on the front and pretend to, not pretend, but I'm gonna sell you this version of progress, to sell you this version of this neo freedom fighter bullshit. When it ain't that, my nigga. You're not doing that. And if you want to talk about that Kendrick Super shit, that was probably the worst. This last year been the worst year of my life. I'm not gonna lie. Not only do I have a disdain for his music, just personally because I don't like the way he rap, but I also have a disdain for niggas who are fake deep. I hate fake deep niggas. I hate niggas who I can tell that these ideas are very surface level with you, and I can tell when a nigga's pandering to me, and I don't like to be so shit. I'm not no nigga in the corner you can sell a nick to and call it a dime. You can't do that with me. I can eyeball it and see that. But I feel like a lot of these dudes don't have that same or maybe it's them wanting. Do people just really yearn for that kind of for freedom? People yearn for that kind of revolutionary, but we don't have it in today's time, so we have to settle for these commercial versions of it. And I feel like that sucks. Like, why do we settle? We as the consumer have more power than we actually realize, and if we decided that we don't want your watered down version of progress, we don't have to accept it. But I think some people are just really desperate for it. People really want it. And we always tell people all the time, like, I don't think I'm the leader that my people need, but in the surge in the war, and every day that comes, I will follow them to the door. I don't know if everybody has to technology, or if they can go and smoke, or maybe you can get you right up from the timeline. Maybe, I think that's a lot of it too, just being able to say that you are history except making history happen.
Look, nobody but Kendrick really knows what Kendrick wanted that performance to be. But having a similar background, I don't believe he meant to be taking on the ones that black power and pending percolation through the political zeitgeist. So that's what we were supposed to be trying to remember, and we all remember how that album was all the problems rapped out on that album, right? Because we want us to get that thing and that is what the album is supposed to be about. Realizing that it's not the Messiah. Or did you even listen to that album? Which is kind of what I'm getting at. And even with all of that said, you think it like that. There's more out there. They got to be like that for a lot of things. That's what the conflict there was. Beyond the entire gimmick of the persona, where's that point? I think he's going to hear when, where, or how to hop on to the Black Power bandwagon. Everybody has a different scale. But I do have to say, your job only to take the reins and drive it to market. He doesn't know how to. That's what a lot of y'all did and are doing. And that's the part that triggers me y'all.
The fuck is it? Where the fuck did you put it, bro? There? Oh my god.
Better we turn to ridicule. All the father and company can't get mad at you for that part. You robbed all of the sleep over and street life experience and then laugh in your face when you get so right. So you create your own version of that experience and use it to the internet. As will be with the analog. So understand, I'm not saying that your experience isn't any less authentic black knowledge, but it also isn't more authentic. That's the part I think some folk are missing and missing purpose, which brings me back to the overcorrection. I think part of the problem is we and us, 30 and older Negroes, tend to use music words. And I don't think that's fair or accurate because, again, we've all been black. Nobody knows merely a very small but very vocal minority of very undersexed folk who dominate internet discourse because there's no peeing or punani anywhere within sniffing distance for them to hop onto. That's now coloring our perception of what type of combos are actually being had between people that are not hiding behind profile pictures. Because again, the internet for a lot of us is our primary, if not sole means of social media. I think there's always been an understanding that the that is relative to the experience of the time. It just so happens that this and the succeeding generation experience is now inextricably tied to the internet. And I think it's what makes this newest version of New Black is a little more, let me just call it more obvious.
Come on, man.
What I can remember.
Thank God that there's a large section of the community because of like Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, a lot of really good community work done on the grounds, online and all that. There's been a really big, I guess, drift like far further left, and that's a really good thing. But the essence is the
fuck is this?
for starting
Disruption? Oh,
in this
fuck.
world is so right that it becomes almost surreal and dichotomous when you actually experience it. When I was in this world, when I was 15, you know, I was just in the state. So it's odd because it doesn't really fixing method for younger people are just out because they're more connected than ever. I never in my life could open my phone and just scroll and see 30 black people at the same time, have different black experiences, intricately laid out with sociology, with text, with science, with all of that. This is an amazing world to be intellectual black leftist in, but that one thing that will do is depress a nigga if you don't have the right structure around. But I had to go out and, you know, find my different find you, find a few, find all these people that were around in the midst of learning about, you know, black people being eaten during slavery, like black people being worn as clothes during slavery. The KKK displacing multiple Canadian villages, Canadian black towns, you know, which were actually in my area that I never learned about. You can find the fuck out if you're not careful, right? Because that's mentally a lot to throw on someone. And it's a societal harm, and at a very high level, being justice and purposeful injustice. Right? They try to make you go. I feel like they try to make you go mad on purpose, right? You have to tell you that's your experience, and it's not. It's not tangible. It's not real. Like, you know, those cops getting paid. You expect to do their job. The cops always need a gun by them. Cops always need a taser. The cops always need to, like, hold you by the side of the road, and your name and write down your ID and everything. You know, and it's just, it's heinous. Because I gotta tell all the young folk out there all the time, to cross the limit, and I'm glad y'all are going to it. Y'all gotta go and try to talk to people where they live. Y'all gotta live with because we become guys by the way I live. It also wasn't all because at the end of the day I was yelling about all this stuff. My students community is not the same case I am. I should be trying to help coax them to that case and uplift all of us. When I decided to do that, that's when, you know, all that happened with this thing. And I was able to actually do better material work because I was actually with another place of work. I was a place of trade, not a place of motivation, not a place of and I don't want to help people go through those ways. But yeah, fam, you gotta have some kind of connectivity at the end of the day. You gotta have something you come home to and something you gotta say, oh, I love it here. And I love that connection to me. And I love my community. And I love, you can't just be going online and allowing them to, whoa.
Understand something, it's not a black thing or even an Asian thing. It's a people thing. Specifically on the internet.
What the fuck, y'all?
The whole contempt for contrary opinions. come from someone not in their peer group. And I get it. In a lot of ways, we made y'all. Thinking the more that we clowned y'all, the more y'all would emulate. For some reason, y'all did. Just in the worst way possible. Turning blackness from an idea to a club. Just as much on who's blue and who's tapped in. Now, I'll be the first to hold that L, but that's it. So some of y'all need to sit down and shut up and let the grown folk tap the floor sometimes, man. Again, angry on that those are getting up behind once again for the second time. That's the issue. And it's not necessarily against black or against black. Again, it's an interest. For all the reasons I stated earlier, a lot of y'all don't know how to listen so much as you just be waiting for your turn to talk. And it turns a lot of folks off of even bothering to do the knowledge with y'all to begin with. I talked about this on Olay a while ago, but there is a era of leadership on the black space. Most people say if you don't know for certain concepts, articulated in a way where you have to work your brain to comprehend it, then you just don't get it. And therefore, I'm worth the engagement unless it is to be ridiculed. Like that was literally what my whole tech video was about, y'all remember. And the irony is, half the time, it's for the most basic Black Power 101 stuff. Like, I cannot tell you how many HBCU alumni, most of them fresh out of commencement, who think they know better than me because I have a whole tech pad in my profile. Only to them, out of the historical Black alma mater was founded by a white man. And then they stroll right on back to the frat house with cut between their balls and their tongue behind where they belong. I swear to God, y'all would be a lot more how goofy them strolls actually do. That's why I like this trying to correct them, I'm not gonna lie. Jokes aside though, like I said before, I'm not gonna put myself in the thinking that the most extreme and vocal portions of the internet are reflective of real life, unless it's white people. Like we've been here before, we know how that goes. Well, also, like I said before, I do think real life is reflected online, maybe a little bit more than some of us like to give credit sometimes. Specifically, those of us who the internet is not the center of our entire life. Like kids out for one reason or another. Some of y'all are the bug, but some of y'all personally, I really couldn't care less how many conversations that I couldn't care less how many
See, that shit was easy. Come on, y'all.
I feel like I've been around the block enough to know that that's probably where all these breakdown videos and think pieces are going to wind up going. Nowhere. Like it usually has and usually does.
Essentially, when you start talking about subjectively, it's like they almost create a kind of figure when you're online content creating. And I'm very guilty of this too. Of creating a devilish figure of what a white person looks like, or what my opposition looks like, what a cool looks like, what a whole tech looks like. That's even separate from like what any other black person would even think. Just because of my different black experience. You know what I mean? So I want to say to y'all, like, online isn't real essence of a day-to-day experience. You gotta go outside and determine what a day-to-day experience of black people is. You gotta set up your own communities of blackness and your own experience of survivability, your experiences of all this. And if your parents haven't taught you that as a new black, I'm so sorry, but you're gonna have to teach yourself that. And that's tough. And that's tough. If you don't have to go and teach yourself that, or you're gonna go like bad in this and essentially just become hyper individual.
What the fuck?
Which is what they want you to be. They want you to stand on this podium looking crazy, right?
The hell was that?
They don't want you in community.
Did y'all see that?
Spurring change. They don't want you talking
I ain't
about
get shit.
influencing their point of view. They want you to be reactionary to the next
The
take.
fuck?
Get off Twitter, you know. Get off this go outside. Like, yeah. That's my point of view.
You know, I thought about this for a long time. Real work gotta happen. First thing first, we need big. And this is when I talk to this is when I
the
take
fuck.
be back, and I love but gotta stop making. He gotta stop using big $5 words. Niggas like him gotta stop using big $5 words. Cause like I get it. That's this is the language you speak in. But the people don't speak that language. Like this, the people don't speak that language. So we gotta.
Yo, what the
simplify ideas.
fuck?
Like so that's number one. Get black folk to understand that leftist ideals are the ideas of progress, and there will be no progress if we understand this. And also, as much as I hate it, we gotta teach class consciousness. We gotta teach our people to not have this hate for white folk. Even though I know it's hard, trust me, I know. But the white folk that's in your neighborhood, he's not your enemy. Those white people in South Philly, it's not your enemy. They are on the same side as us. So these simple ideas, and I think it starts with us, to be honest. Like it starts with us, people with platforms, people with voices, the people that understand the ideas, to make sure that ideas get to them. Because just like anything inside art or creativity, the consumer doesn't know what they want. They don't know. The algorithm makes sure that people open YouTube and open TikTok and open IG Reels, and they're just scrolling. It's mindless scrolling. They don't know what they do. And to the algorithm gives it to them, we got to make sure that we are giving them what they want.
I'm taking a fucking break, bro. What the fuck is this?
Specifically reminds me of the discourse that has been being.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop real quick because what the fuck was that, man?